delusion led me here. Any founder would be lying if that's not part of their, like, who they are a little bit. Like, you're a little bit delusional to start this company and believe you can take it to the moon. But I really, really did. It didn't land in the same form than I thought it would.
That you had dreamed
and
it
that I
up.
had dreamed
Right.
up. But we did a great job. And we supported a lot of people when we brought this modality forward.
CEOs spend their days building their businesses, and strategic questions often get pushed to the nights and weekends when they finally have time and space to think about the bigger picture. I call that CEO pajama time. I'm Sari Kaganoff, the CEO of AITSA, where I work alongside health tech leaders at exactly those moments. Come behind the scenes with me to learn from successful CEOs about the critical decisions and inflection points that shape their companies. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the CEO Pajama Time podcast. Today, I'm excited to host Tori Lecomte, the former CEO and founder of Sesh, which was acquired by Caraway. Can you start us off by kind of taking us to the Wayback Machine? Tell us about the problem that was kind of keeping you up at night that made you start a company.
I built Sesh, which was a digital platform for therapist-led groups. And we had hundreds of licensed therapists trained in the group modality. And what really led me to bring this to market was my own experience with a mental health crisis that led me into a therapeutic group setting, and how under accessible and underutilized I thought that this modality was for how beneficial it was to me personally and a lot of the folks that were around me. I was an inpatient in IOP for anorexia, and I wasn't new to therapy, but this was the first time that I had seen the therapeutic group model work outside of what I had sort of envisioned it as like an AA or NA church basement group style therapy model was really something that impacted my life. And I felt that would also bring down the cost of therapist-led support by the one-to-many model. So this was something I felt very strongly needed to be in the market and very strongly could support the difficulty that folks had in accessing therapists and the wait times as well, in addition to the unique therapeutic benefits of a group.
And so what was your background? Were you a former CEO or what made you in the healthcare space? What made you sort of qualified to do this?
That's nothing. What does that mean? Like delusion? No, I started my career in investment banking, so I had a financial analyst background and supported like deals that were were tech based, but more consumer tech, and at the time a lot of kind of wellness tech like Fitbit and things like that, and so got a little bit of a financial training ground there, and then after that I worked for a high growth startup in the fintech space. And then I started my business. So I didn't have a CEO background. This was the first time founding a company. And I also had no hard-earned healthcare sector space. So that's, it was a really, in retrospect, just delusion that I had in that I felt that this was like an unmet need. And I felt that I had the skills at least in terms of determination and structure and discipline to get something to market.
That's really cool that you cared so much about this and you were just like, I'm going to make it happen. Tell us about like the beginning. How did it go in the beginning? What went well? What was hard? What challenges you faced?
Yeah. I mean, I started the business in late 2019, right before the pandemic happened. And I had, because being a first-time founder, I wanted to prove out as much as I could the economics, the willingness to pay, all of the things that I knew would be holders back of me gaining funding or legitimacy in sort of early angel investments and seed investments. So I built an in-person model, actually. So we had always wanting to do at least a hybrid model of online and in person, but the easiest way that I could do it was like literally put up sort of digital flyers and rent a space and hire a therapist to have groups in person with, imagine a circle of chairs and make that experience as kind of community oriented and lower acuity as almost like a fitness class was sort of my in my mind at the time. And I knew early that I wanted to have therapists at the helm and not coaches, and this was something that, this was a strategic choice that I made early that before I knew, I guess, it was right, but I felt strongly that I wanted to keep therapists leading these sessions, and, um, when we moved digitally in very early 2020, like, we had oversubscribed these in-person sessions that were moving digitally pretty seamlessly, just like other things at that time had a
Yeah.
push towards a digital rejoining online. Like,
Mm-hmm.
and this was 2020, so the digital health and sort of remote care industry was already existed, but was blooming in a different direction. And I felt
Right.
in terms of having therapists at the helm, I wanted to have some sort of, at the time, quality control filter, and it was a lane that I
Mm-hmm.
chose. So, um, we started somewhat in person and moved to online, and also, we decided to go consumer first, of course. I say
Mm-hmm.
of course in retrospect, but, like, we could have done it another way. I could have started,
Yeah.
in, I don't know, in a clinic setting or a an employee lounge, but I
Mm-hmm.
wanted to make this sort of, consumer-led, and I'm happy to talk more about what that
Yeah.
ended up meaning for us, but
Yeah. Oh, park that thought 'cause I'd love to hear. But when you say consumer, just to clarify, they were paying out of pocket. It wasn't even processing insurance. Is
totally,
that
all
correct?
out of pocket,
Okay.
no insurance, and I wanted to make this, I was living in New York City, and I don't wanna sort of, mm level down therapy by sort of watering it down to this to as like low acuity or uh colloquial as a fitness class, but I wanted to sort of bring it into something that was more proactive instead of reactive from the
Yeah.
beginning. And so a lot of proactive services, for yourself, for empowerment, betterment, just uh hy- hygiene, mental health hygiene, physical,
Mm-hmm.
strength, they are self-pay, or they were at the time. I think the idea of
Right.
having something that was supporting the future state of yourself was not something that was even considered to be insurance
Yeah.
covered, right? So certainly yes.
So maybe to understand the context, it sounds like some of these decisions, almost you're talking about them as if you got pushback from people around you or they were not the market standard. I'm curious,
Well,
were these, how did you come to these? How did people react to them, whether it was your investors or other folks?
Given my background, I had, like, always I had been used to people pushing back on ideas. Like, I guess I came from a little bit more of a defensive standpoint, and maybe that was,
Mm-hmm.
like, lack of confidence, so overcompensating and trying to build a foundation of, um, data that I knew that I could call upon in order to defend myself, like, in the
Mm-hmm.
court of law against, like, early
Yeah.
pitches to investors, and so I think you're picking up on that, which is absolutely so right, that I think that my background of, like, working with a lot of folks from the, financial realm, asking questions that, like, I sort of anticipated pushback because I knew how intense these sort of meetings would
Yeah.
be. And my plan was to raise venture money. My plan was not to
Mm-hmm.
have sort of like at the time, like a from the get-go self-sustaining business. I felt that, especially with going consumer first, I wanted to be able to have money to raise awareness of the product and all of these things that I felt that
Yeah.
it was a little bit of a different time too, even ever so recently, to that being my absolute default in my mind. And so I was building up this
Mm-hmm.
arsenal of information to sort of, um, back my early pitches to investors, I think. I think you're totally right. I was playing
Yeah.
the defense early. Also, it was a new concept. Like,
Right.
groups online, like, I know that again, like, we've changed so much in the past 6 years in sort of our habits and the way that we interact with groups and individuals and technologies, but, like, you and I have met so many times digitally
Yeah.
and rarely in person, and it's like that wasn't necessarily as much of the norm,
Yeah.
especially with therapy. So I think it was a new concept that luckily, truly luckily, the the fabric of how we interacted with people
Yeah.
began to shift towards this being really, um, more and more obvious.
Yeah. And so how did you come up with these ideas? Were you talking to people in the market? I mean, obviously you had a certain vision for how it would be. Part of that was shaped by your own experience, but you know, where was the data coming from to say this is how we should do it?
Well, I think more and more data came out around the the mental health need, the
Hmm.
therapist shortage, the this underlying and growing isolation problem that COVID had surfaced for all of us, and how it
Hmm.
and I think so groups really made sense from getting people together literally perspective, and then you had the additional therapist at the helm to sort of add the therapy component, and so it
Hmm.
sort of reinforced just how important group therapy could be in that moment in terms of like where we came up with ideas of sessions and things like that. I think we had so it was user demand and also therapist demand of they a lot
Hmm.
of therapists have amazing practices where they meet one-on-one with folks, and that's where, whether we want to say it like this or not, it's kind of where the money is, right?
Hmm.
They can charge a certain amount. It's more um it's more insurance, it's more covered, like more likely to be covered by insurance. And then they have these passions maybe that are specifically supporting folks that are like the Asian American community,
Hmm.
or supporting people that have been in an abusive relationship. These therapists have specialties
Like
and
niches.
passions
Yeah.
and niches.
Yeah.
And with other than, maybe getting to work on that subject matter with one-on-one sometimes, being able to hold a space, they were able to work with us, choose sort of a niche or a topic that they wanted to cover
Hmm.
weekly or multiple times a day weekly. And then the people would come. We were only really able to do that super successfully when we had the shelves full of sessions and the enough
Hmm.
sort of um, members that were popping in to different groups. But this enabled us to um, source topics really well. Therapists are at the front line of
Hmm.
what
Yeah.
people might need, but then it's also paired with their deep passion for the subject, for the topic. And
Right.
so I think we were able to, they were able to sort of be part of our own little creator economy of
Yeah.
how how these groups pinned up and started.
So it was almost like a marketplace in some ways. Not
Yes.
exactly, but there
No,
was like two sides to it
yeah.
that you
I
had to build
mean,
up.
absolutely. And the difficulty of propping up a marketplace was very true in our case. Like we had to build a certain amount of sessions with a certain amount of therapists to be credible, and not just
Yeah.
credible to, like, again, like the investor pitches or whatever, but literally incredible to the consumer who's browsing your app
Right.
trying to find something that's relevant to them at a time of day that's relevant to
That
them.
they can do. Yeah.
So it ended up absolutely being a market, like having a lot of the pain points of building a marketplace.
Hmm.
And then a lot of, I think, the set it and forget it to some degree, and we could talk about how we insisted and quality control and clinical oversight later, but like, you know, we had something that was working and was sort of continuing to go because the
Yeah.
therapists wanted more, and our members wanted more.
So you implied before that there were kind of business implications to starting as a direct to consumer. So can you tell us more about that?
Obviously, the marketing spend that we needed to have at the time across user generating, like, uh, paid marketing nodes was huge. I mean, we were competing with companies that were growing and growing in size and their own marketing spend. A few years later, the it wasn't until, I mean, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but like 2022 where a Talkspace and BetterHelp were like defaulting to B2B because the
Hmm.
continuing
Yeah.
to pay for consumer was not as beneficial. I mean, it wasn't really working for them. And I think we were so in the early 2020s, the earliest years, like 2020, 2021, 2022, we were kind of paying for marketing, like marketing market share with all of this growing
Yeah.
industry of digital therapy we all decided at some point to go B2B. And this had been part of my plan. Like, I'm not just saying that. If I in my sort of financial model, even in the earliest days talking to investors, I knew that the sort of the scale could come with B2B and I guess in this case selling into employers. And that's what we ended up doing. And I think the implications of us not doing that at the beginning, you could say that we wasted a bunch of time and money, right? But like I said about the marketplace, how would we have filled the shelves and gotten enough data and had like the clinical, like the rigor of sort of our therapist program and like all of these things that we did for our group therapists, we wouldn't have had that in place. So no regrets, but it did cost us time, and time is everything when you're a small startup.
Can you tell me a little bit more about your fundraising process over those years? What went well? What was difficult?
Yeah, I think we got relatively lucky, really lucky. I had some early angel funding, and sort of self propped up. Like, I had invested some of my own savings into the earliest moments, of course. And then we started pitching to investors about a seed round. And this was after we had users and we could prove that we were making money weekly and that we were growing and all of these things. And that we had an app already in the App Store, which at the time was like collateral that we could show and share about what exactly we were doing. So I went out to investors, all digitally, none in person. This is summer 2020, late summer, and ended up having a few conversations with great firms, and raised $3 million from Polaris and Arch Ventures I think it was by late September of 2020 we had secured that funding. And then after that, they continued to reinvest and a little bit because we weren't quite ready for a Series A. But they knew that this was a meaningful and important thing and was growing. So what do we do?
And what were the metrics by which you knew you weren't ready for an A?
The goalposts kept changing, as they always do. And in 2022, we are, like I said, around the time that we were pushing hard to employer, we, I think the amount of money that it was like a little bit confusing to everyone in the world, but about what exactly we needed to prove in order to get that Series A money. And at the time, it was like, okay, continue to show that we were able to sign larger and larger employer deals. And then we will move on to like an insurance back world. But my plan was sort of like consumer, employer, and go from there. And it was working. We signed a huge deal with REI, all of their in-store and corporate employees, which was massive and proved my, burgeoning thesis about how this could be super supportive for retail employees. And anyway, so was hoping that we could continue to sort of move forward and get more and more retail customers and larger of those deals. And in terms of a number of employees covered and revenue in the door, that we would hit that mark shortly, and I mean, we were reaching, reach profitability and no problem. But at the time we ended up getting, having more conversations about acquisitions than we did about Series A funding. And that's when we began to sort of pursue those conversations.
And those came in the door? Like, you were not pursuing them, or you were?
No, I mean, I think it had to do with the landscape changing, our investors also wanting to support this product that we had built and make sure that it continued to grow, and me too. And so what's the best way that we could do that? And I think at the time was like finding a home for it. Um,
Mm-hmm.
it's not something that I envisioned doing so early, but I think it was the best for, you know, for everyone at the time, because again, like I said, the goalposts kept changing, and to what end would this product that I believe could be absolutely
Yeah.
massive, and can it be a standalone product forever?
Can you walk me through some of that decision-making process? Like maybe even starting with the timeline. So you're trying to raise the A, you're talking to a bunch of investors, then what happens? Like how does the acquisition topic come up? How do you think about it? Who do you talk to?
Thinking back, and probably on the drive of my computer that I'm talking on to you right now, is like I have board decks of like quarterly, ways in which you can help us type of thing. And of course,
Mhm.
founders always talk about hiring, and VCs always want to support you in hiring, meeting your sales goals, clinical advisory board, all the things that they're good at. And then in terms of growth, I felt like I had presented pretty consistently over a couple of quarters, like ways in which you
Mhm.
could sort of help us, you know,
Almost like channel partners
panel
in a way.
partnerships, like becoming a barnacle on a whale of like
Mhm.
a larger, a huge, 20-year-old plus organization, like a Weight Watchers or something. What if everyone had access to our groups, et cetera? It's like all of these
Mhm.
amazing opportunities that seemed like if we got that, it would be a no-brainer that we
Mm.
would, this would be larger and larger than we can imagine. And then second, it was these conversations about partnerships turned into, from my perspective, like conversations about potential acquirers, because at some point, the whale that I mentioned being the barnacle on the whale, they might actually be better off just acquiring our technology. And I think that's what we
Right.
saw through conversations with some of the organizations that we wanted to work with, and what I saw with
Mhm.
sort of founder pain and strain. And the biggest thing that we were able to provide Caraway, who ended up acquiring us, was our therapist network. This ended up being the biggest thing
Mm.
because we had very, very low churn in terms of therapists that
Mhm.
they loved working with us. And we had a program, like our therapist acquisition program and therapist retention program was very, very strong. And therefore we had like a large and loyal base of clinicians that we were working with. And this is one of the pain points that a lot of the companies at the time in this space had.
Right.
One of the most difficult and strenuous parts of their product. And so that was
Yeah.
something that we were able to sort of support a lot of the potential partners and ultimately our acquirer with.
Did it feel in any way like a failure? Like you set out to build the company, you were trying to raise the A, you were trying to grow, and in the end, it seemed like the best path was to
Yeah.
exit, but not just to somebody bigger, but to somebody who kind of wants you for, like, in some ways, a piece of what you are, more
Mhm.
so than the sort of thesis of what you've built.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's I think every founder, like I started talking about how delusion led me here. And I think
Hmm.
any founder would be lying if that's not sort of part of what they, part of sort of how, like the catalyst of like who they are a little bit. Like you're a little bit
Yeah.
delusional to start this company and believe you can take it to the moon. But I really, really did. And I really, really thought that, so of course, like, you know, of course there was part of me that was like, dang, this is a completely different form that I thought,
Hmm.
that I hoped for the business. And at the same time, it still feels like a major success to me because
Hmm.
the impact, what we built. And so sort of
Yeah.
still like conversations like this, like explaining the story, there's still like not a really go to, there's not a Sesh in the market. Like, and I think that there
Right.
will be something like that. And I'm excited for whatever that looks like. But I'm proud, and I feel like there's a winningness, but absolutely. Like it didn't land
Yeah.
in the same form than I thought it
That
would,
you had dreamed
and
it
that I
up.
had dreamed of,
Right.
and that I thought, frankly, is like most helpful long term. But we did
Hmm.
the we did a great job, and
Yeah.
we supported a lot of people when we brought this modality forward. Maybe not forever and ever and always, but for the
Yeah.
time that Sesh was seshing, we had a lot
Yeah.
of amazing groups and a lot of therapists that we loved
Yeah.
working with and loved working with us.
So at the time when you sold to Caraway, did they intend to continue the groups or they didn't
Yeah,
even
they
really?
did.
Okay. But
And
then in the end that didn't
it didn't. I
play
mean,
out and they got acquired themselves.
they got acquired
Yeah.
themselves. So that sort of got pushed even farther and farther down into dust, basically.
Mm-hmm.
But the idea was that the groups from Sesh would be sort of an entry point, I think, in part
Mm-hmm.
for some of their members would come in with a mental health issue or
Right.
concern, anxiety, sort of a lower acuity need, and they would be able to be filtered into their more holistic care model via a group. It was just like a kind of a top of funnel type of situation, and then the groups would be part of sort of their
Mm-hmm.
community based
Yeah.
model, which they were hopeful would provide like longer and longer retention for their users as
Mm-hmm.
they moved from primary care to OBGYN and sort of this larger, more holistic model
Yeah.
that they had envisioned. So, yes, absolutely.
Tell me like how you came to that decision. Like, was it sort of like a sudden, like, oh, I realize this is the path, or was it kind of thing after thing? Who were you talking to? Like, did you talk to your leadership team? Did you talk to your board? Like, what was the sort of process by which you came from being like, I'm growing, I got REI, which is amazing. I'm gonna raise an A to like, okay, actually, this is the better exit path. Like, what was that process that you went through?
Of course, like conversations with my board, conversations with my own sort of mentors in my
Mm-hmm.
life, and it seemed like the obvious path in the end. Like I wouldn't have done it if I didn't think it was
Mm-hmm.
like the best outcome for us at the time, honestly. And I wish
Mm-hmm.
I wish that I guess we were able to take this farther independently, but I do feel like
Mm-hmm.
at least the decade in which Sesh existed, like we I was fighting against this pushback about us being a point solution.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was sort of like, to what end are we continuing to be that point solution? I don't believe it's a point
Right.
solution. I don't believe that groups are. I think that it can be a standalone service, and
Yeah.
I think it can be huge. But people at the time, there was a little bit of consolidation. Also, it had to do with like current market trends.
Yeah.
What's going on right now? Is there going to be sort of, I mean, the early 2020 therapy pop in terms of
Mm-hmm.
funding was diminishing and going down. And so you're sort of
Right.
looking at market trends as well and trying to
Right.
make the best decision based on your gut, your team, your conversations with your board, conversations with your mentors, and then also the market, because we don't exist in total isolation either,
Right.
unfortunately.
So, knowing now what you ended up, the kind of trajectory you went on, first direct to consumer, then expanding to employers, then selling to Caraway, would you have done anything different, like in retrospect, to sort of, even knowing, let's say you end up in the same spot, or maybe to change the spot where you ended up, like knowing that's where it landed, would you have changed the path a little bit?
Probably. I believe that a company with a group with like super well funded group therapy company, group support company can be absolutely huge, standalone, and consumer only. But given the amount of
Mm-hmm.
money that we had, I wish that we had spent our effort early on more of I guess, like an enterprise sales move. I don't know how we
Okay.
would have done it operationally, given sort of the marketplace constraints I mentioned. You kind of have to build the
Mm-hmm.
shelves and open the grocery store before you're able to let people in
Yeah.
and sell the goods. But I feel like for us, given the amount of money that we had raised and the amount of time, sort of the you light the match when the check is sent to you,
Yeah.
and I then you start to see in real time how quickly that
The match
the
starts burning
matches.
down.
And I'm not just talking about burn. Like we were super frugal and all, like we weren't. Oh, but it's just in terms of expectations, market expectations of
Mm-hmm.
how fast you need to go. The amount of actual time you have to experiment or open up that shop and get
Yeah.
etc. you I think that it probably would have made more sense for us to start earlier with enterprise sales.
And maybe you could have gone farther, essentially, or
Exactly.
at
We
least
would have been
gotten more
able to
revenue.
in the case that we would have been able to secure those customers we would have been able to prove
Raise an A.
prove revenue before. We would have had more money in the bank to continue to push on that, and then we would have made it a bit farther. But then the question still, like, I still ask the question of to what end, because we would have been told, and you and I would have come up with a bunch of different reasons to defend our own thesis about why it's not, but you're still met with like, this is a point solution, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And at some point that becomes exhausting. So I do think maybe pivoting or spending more toward energy and towards a enterprise sales team or employer sales team earlier would have been a smarter move at the time. I don't know if that's what I would have done in today's market. Like, now the employer, direct to employer sales for digital health companies is even more saturated. And so I don't know if that would have been today the best thing
but back
to do.
then. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. So I'd love to hear, given your experience, what lessons do you feel like you've taken from this that you would share with other entrepreneurs? Whether it's, anything around how you went to market, how you manage your board, how you work with your team, or how you manage your own energy, any sort of tips or guidance you have for other entrepreneurs?
Gosh, I don't have like some sort of productivity hack like to share with your listeners, but I do feel like one thing that helps me is having some no phone time where we can, and sometimes that means like a full overnight backpacking with no phone once a month. Maybe not alone these days, like with friends or with a partner. But like having no phone, no access to internet for a minute, actually, with no interruptions, no inbound, no noise, I think really can help you reset some of your own goals and even like values that you have about why you started this, what you're doing. That can sort of I think probably reframe your, like, guide you, put you back on track, the track that you intended to be on. And I think that's super important, probably. Yeah, I would say less noise if possible.
And when you are making these strategic decisions, other than going and backpacking, what process do you have? Like, do you write things down? Do you talk to people? Like, what kind of walk me through, like, right as you're making that decision or in the weeks running up to it, like, or you're just running around having meetings? Like, how did you sort of come to that point, like, in a kind of mechanical way almost?
During the day of like back-to-back meetings or going from here to there, there's not that much time to really, of course you're thinking critically throughout those times, but there's not, I think having a strategic moment of pause throughout the day is important. If that's at dinner time or at lunchtime quietly, that's what was really, really helpful. And then I'm able to actually write down my thoughts, and pros and cons of each scenario, and then be able to like articulate that to people who I trust but aren't with me along that crazy journey 24 hours a day. And then distilling what's happening and then asking for feedback with a level head is so important, and sort of difficult to do, but that's kind of the most mechanical I can describe.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point, because you're hearing from the market, the potential buyers, the investors, all those things, but how do you distill that into something you can communicate to somebody else to help you make that decision? So what about myth busting? What do you think people have told you as a CEO that you're like, yeah, no, that's totally not true, or ignore that piece of advice? Like, anything that you've heard that you think is, don't go with that.
Oh, I mean, this might be controversial, but once I had my first child while I was in 2022. So, and before I had sold the business, and it was sort of honestly like the hardest and most difficult time in terms of just like chaos, optionality, revenue, everything. And I had a baby. And it's funny because people would say like, oh, this is your second baby. Like, and I'm like, no, these are completely separate things. There's nothing. So like, maybe controversial topic. this business, while I absolutely loved it and would have given it so much, it wasn't my baby. My baby's my baby. And actually,
Yeah.
having a child helped me reprioritize my day, and become a little bit more disciplined and diligent about decisions. I
Yeah.
couldn't put something off until later. I had to actually make the conscious effort to do things now within like a very, I feel like I became more effective after I had children.
Yeah. Some people say that, which I don't know. I feel
What
like
do
I had
you
my
feel?
kids early, so I had my kids so early that I didn't really have the career before the first kid. So I've always had to do it together.
Uh-huh.
But one thing I always tell people is like, the to-do list will never be done. Like there will always be more things on it. So you really need to structure what you want your day to be and then decide what you're gonna put in it. And it's not gonna be like some people are like, oh, I'll just finish this thing. And then it's like, no, what time do you want to stop? What time do you want to go do, spend family time and then come back and then like prioritize whatever is left in that time.
Uh-huh.
But the other thing I tell people is, take the big picture view, right? Not every day is going to be perfectly balanced. But look at the month. Like, did you spend enough time in the right places over the course of the month? And you can't necessarily do it every day, but if you take the right like lens of zoom, it can
Mm-hmm.
help. Um,
Absolutely. No, I think that's right.
but yeah,
But I think the myth is like
definitely.
your business is your baby. But it's like people, I think I was
Yeah.
confused about what a baby actually meant if I had believed that. Um, right.
Yeah.
And then just being even more effective and disciplined, I think, with my time and decision making and even sort of framework of how I approach my day after one and then two children, like has really um
Yeah.
to been a pleasant surprise, and I think goes
Hmm.
against popular belief.
Yeah. And tactically speaking, how did you manage maternity leave? I mean, you were in the middle of
Oh my God.
running a company, fundraising
Um,
slash selling, like,
yeah, I actually, so we had, I thank goodness we're remote business. So I was able to work remotely throughout the first year of my child's life, be home with her
mm,
throughout the first year with support. We had a wonderful, like supportive nanny who's like a part of our house
yeah,
during that time. But basically we, I wish I could say that I took off more time than I did, but I can say that the time that I was sort of plugged in was from my pajamas
right.
at the earliest days, and actually,
Literally,
but I
CEO pajama
but I
time.
am exactly, but I am proud of um one thing, which is like, well, I'm proud of a lot of things, but one of the things, like the salesperson that ended up closing the REI deal, I had my baby on a Thursday and I onboarded him on Monday. I felt
Oh,
that
wow.
I was the only person that could really, unfortunately, arm him with sort of the
Hmm.
the founder story, the juice that he needed to be able to sort of begin selling. And
Hmm.
I onboarded him on Monday after having given birth on Thursday, which is, I guess, like simultaneously not proud of that, but the fact that it turned out to be such
Yeah.
an awesome hire, I am proud of that because I was able to sort of delegate something in a
Hmm.
strategic way, even if that meant having a Zoom call off video earlier than I would have
Right.
loved. So,
Right.
so man, but yes, that's real CEO pajama time is CEO
Right.
maternity leave.
Yeah, for sure. So how long did you take off? So you onboarded him on that Monday, but then like did you take any time
Yes,
off?
I had about 6 weeks of like
Hmm.
articulated, I will be off, like prior to giving birth, I will be off this, like, please cover me for this and this. I would have to say my board was super supportive. What's very interesting, we didn't really get into, is like, and I don't know if this has been other females that you've spoken to in the healthcare space. It's almost, even if you're not starting a company that's for women, a lot of times they will put you with the female partners, maybe because
Hmm.
they want to be with
Oh,
you.
interesting.
And I'm so excited to have worked with such amazing, an amazing general partner at Polaris, amazing partnership at Arch, many women, and I don't know how that came to be, but some of these women had children and had
Hmm.
like the largest more like hearts and also sense about what was to come for me in my first
Yeah.
with my the first year of my child's life, and certainly in the first couple of months. And I felt that my board and investors were extremely warm and supportive, and
Yeah.
actually like helped me sort of return, like we're even more active, in not in an overbearing way, but in like a
Yeah.
reintegration to heavy hitting work way post the first couple of months. But I did feel like they gave me space, and everyone gave me the space that I needed. And in a company where you're making the maternity leave yourself, the policy yourself, you want to model well, but it's also you've got 20 people and working. That's it. It's not a this is
Right.
you also need to be steering the ship. So how do you draw the line between actually taking off work and modeling good behavior, and making sure that you're going in the right direction and as fast as you want to go?
Yeah. It's a tough trade-off because on the one hand, yeah, you want to model good behavior, but also you're the only one who's the CEO and the only one who will be. And so it's sort of to your point of with 20 people who's steering the ship, like you can't really fully take off for, whatever you might in some other context.
I
So,
definitely brought
um,
I think I saw you at Health in one of the years. Maybe it was after I had sold the company, but I was probably there with Caraway. But I had brought my baby to
mhm,
2 conferences, which is kind of crazy in retrospect, but I was like, it was very natural to me to do that. And so I would walk
right.
around with her. My first child, I would walk around with her in like in a carrier. My husband would be there. It worked really
Mhm.
well.
Yeah. Did you ever get pushback for that?
No, but I probably was looked at a certain way, but
Right.
I never got pushback. I think the folks at Health were kind enough to like give my husband I think some sort of wristband as like
Okay.
my supporter during that time, which was shout out to them for doing that.
Mhm.
Um no, I think I didn't get any pushback. No, no, no. But I do feel like I was probably categorized in a certain way that, you
Mhm.
know, I can't control.
And you felt like that was worth the risk.
Yeah, I mean, I don't feel like I don't really care. I mean, if as long at that point I wasn't like raising money for the first time, or I wasn't like
Mhm.
starting it was like a matter of us getting clients and us getting business.
Yeah.
And I needed to be there in person and meet with folks. And
Right.
that was important for the business, whether my baby was there or not. I don't know if it
Right.
mattered. I want to believe it didn't matter, but I do think it may have changed the perspective of some people to me.
Right.
It probably changed the perspective of maybe some women that were deferring pregnancy for corporate reasons. That
Mhm.
maybe they could do
Yeah.
both.
I spent a lot of time pumping in various conference rooms, but never brought a baby
I
to
know.
one.
I
So,
used the cool um station, like pumping station. What is it called
mhm.
again? Muma something. One of these like pods.
Yeah. Yeah. Mhm.
Um
But they don't have a sink in them, I feel like
I feel
usually.
like, and
Anyway.
again, I think it's progress, but I think there's a lot of ways to go. There's not even a phone charger in there.
So, as we're getting toward the end of the session, I'd love to know, like, just taking a step back, thinking through your whole journey, any like parting thoughts, words of wisdom, advice for other folks that you want to share?
I mean, I think if something is if something is bothering you so much, and that sort of you've begun to think about sort of the risk of you not doing it outweighing the risk of failure, then absolutely do it.
Mhm.
Right? I think there's no
Okay.
regrets in bringing in trying something that you feel like, yeah, if you begin to feel like the risk of not doing something outweighs the potential risk, go for it. Even if that means starting a business, or make changing a job or changing your job and working
Yeah.
in a different sector and different direction that you feel like is more meaningful.
So even though it didn't end the way you expected, it was still worth the
Of
journey.
course. I think so. And like next time, you know, I next time I feel like I have a lot of learnings to bring towards building something else.
Yeah. Is that your plan or do you not know
You
yet?
know, I think, like I said, if something is so important to me that I can't hold
Yeah.
back, I'm not just going to start a company to start a company.
Right. That makes sense. I guess no one should do that.
No one, I
So,
don't, but people are successful in doing that. I don't know, not me.
yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Tori. I really appreciate you sharing your experience with the audience.
Thank you so much for having me.